Jake Murphy stepped off the transport shuttle, and immediately knew he was out of his league. The Intergalactic Defense Academy stretched before him like a chrome and crystal monument to alien superiority, all impossible angles and gravity-defying architecture that made his eyes water just looking at it. Around him, his fellow new recruits were an impressive collection of scales, tentacles, and what appeared to be sentient geology. Well, Jake muttered, shouldering his duffel bag, Mom always said I'd amount to something. Pretty sure this wasn't what she had in mind. The human contingent at the academy was exactly him. Apparently, Earth had drawn the short straw in the galactic conscription lottery, and Jake had drawn the shorter straw back on Earth. Lucky him. A shadow fell across the landing pad, and Jake looked up to see 4 arms crossed in what was universally recognized as the I'm not impressed pose. Commander Vextar stood 8 feet tall, built like a crocodile that had been hitting the gym and taking steroids. His reptilian features were set in a permanent scowl that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else than dealing with new recruits. So, Vextar said, his voice like gravel in a blender, "You're the human." Guilty as charged, Jake replied with what he hoped was confidence, but probably came across as mild terror. Vextar circled him slowly, all 4 eyes examining Jake like he was a particularly disappointing science project. The Academy has trained warriors from over 300 species. We've molded champions from the lava worlds of Pyrrhion, the crushing depths of Aquatic Prime, and the razor storms of Kepler-7. He stopped directly in front of Jake. And now they send me this. This has a name, you know. I know your name, soft skin. Jake Murphy from the backwater system Terra. What I don't know is why Command thinks your species is ready for real military training. Vextar's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. You smell like fear and processed food. Jake considered mentioning that he'd only had airline peanuts for the past 6 hours, but figured that wouldn't help his case. Look, Commander, I know I'm not much to look at, but I'm here to learn. That's got to count for something, right? A sound that might have been laughter rumbled from Vextar's chest. Learn, boy, this isn't your local community college, this is the premier military academy in the galaxy. We don't teach, we forge. We break down the weak and rebuild the strong. His 4 arms spread wide. Most species send their best. Their strongest, their most genetically perfect specimens. He leaned down until his snout was inches from Jake's face. Earth sent you. Jake tried not to breathe through his nose. Vextar's breath smelled like something had died, been resurrected, then died again. Maybe Earth's definition of best is different from yours. Maybe Earth's definition of everything is different from reality. Vextar straightened up and began walking toward the academy entrance. Follow me, human. Let's see how long you last before you wash out and crawl back to your dirt ball. As they walked, Jake took in more of his surroundings. The other new recruits were impressive in that special way that made him feel like he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong movie. There was a being that looked like it was made of living crystal, another that seemed to be composed entirely of energy held together by sheer willpower, and something that defied description but appeared to have way too many teeth. The Academy has a 93% washout rate in the first month, Vextar said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Most species can't handle the physical demands. The mental pressure breaks others. Some just realize they're not cut out for protecting the galaxy and go home to whatever mediocre existence awaits them. And the other 7% become legends. Vextar's tone suggested that Jake would not be joining that particular club. Your orientation begins at 0600 tomorrow. Try not to die in your sleep. The paperwork is annoying. Jake's first night at the academy was spent in a dormitory that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard about beds but had never actually seen one. His roommates were an eclectic bunch that made the cantina scene from Star Wars look like a normal Tuesday at the office. "Greetings, carbon-based lifeform," said a voice that sounded like it was coming through water. Jake turned to see what appeared to be a mass of purple tentacles wearing a uniform. "I am Zephyr of the Cephalopod Collective. Based on preliminary observations and statistical analysis, I calculate your survival probability at approximately 14.7%, with a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. Thanks for the pep talk," Jake said. "Really feeling the team spirit here." A voice like grinding concrete came from the corner. "I am granite. I am rock. You are squishy." Jake looked over to see what was essentially a walking boulder with arms and legs, somehow managing to wear military fatigues. "Nice to meet you too, Granite. I'm Jake. I'm human." "I know," Granite replied. "You smell different." "That's encouraging," Jake muttered. A shimmer in the air caught his attention and suddenly a vaguely humanoid figure made of what looked like contained starlight appeared next to him. "Oh goodness, I'm so sorry, the figure said in a voice like wind chimes. I didn't mean to phase through the wall again. I'm Wisp. I get nervous and sometimes I become incorporeal. It's embarrassing, really, and my parents always said I needed better control of my molecular cohesion, but stress makes it worse and this place is very stressful, don't you think? Breathe, Wisp, Jake said gently. Or whatever you do instead of breathing. Actually, I process ambient energy through quantum absorption, but that's semantics really, and oh dear. I'm rambling again, aren't I? Zephyr's tentacles writhed in what might have been amusement. According to my calculations, you ramble approximately 67% of the time, with increased frequency correlating directly to stress levels. That's not helping, Zephyr, Wisp said, flickering slightly. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova. At precisely 0600, Commander Vextar's voice boomed through the dormitory speakers like the voice of an angry god with a megaphone. Rise and shine, recruits. Time to separate the warriors from the waste of oxygen. Jake stumbled out of his not-quite-a-bed to find his roommates already assembled. Zephyr had somehow arranged his tentacles into what passed for military attention. Granite looked exactly the same as he had the night before because rocks don't sleep, and Wisp was flickering in and out of visibility like a bad hologram. Today we begin your physical conditioning, Vextar announced once they'd assembled in the training facility. The space was enormous, filled with obstacle courses that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a grudge against physics and a sadistic streak. For most of you, this will be routine. Standard gravity, standard atmosphere, standard expectations. He paused, and Jake swore he saw the hint of a smile on those reptilian features. However, some species require special accommodation. The human, for instance, comes from a world with pathetically weak gravitational pull. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself on equipment designed for real warriors. Jake felt something shift in the air around him, a subtle heaviness that made his bones feel denser. The gravity had increased, though he couldn't tell by how much. Around him, the other recruits exchanged glances that clearly said, well, there goes the human. Murphy, Vextar barked. You'll start with the basic obstacle course. Try not to embarrass your entire species more than they already have. Jake stepped up to the starting line, feeling the extra weight in his legs, his arms, his chest. It was noticeable, sure, but it felt like putting on a heavy backpack, not like being crushed by an invisible mountain. Something feels weird, he said to himself. Then looked up at Vextar. Commander, is the gravity set correctly? It feels a little off. Vextar's four eyes widened slightly. Off? How exactly does it feel off, recruit? I don't know, just heavier than usual, but not by much. Maybe the calibration needs adjusting. Jake stretched his arms experimentally. I mean, I felt worse after a long day at the construction site back home. Behind him, Jake heard Zephyr whisper calculating something about atmospheric pressure and gravitational constants, while Granite made what might have been a confused rumbling sound. Wisp had gone completely invisible, which Jake was learning meant she was either very nervous or very surprised. Vextar's tongue flicked out, tasting the air again. The calibration is exactly as intended, human. Perhaps you should focus less on the equipment and more on not failing spectacularly. Fair enough, Jake said with a shrug. Where do I start? What happened next would go down in Academy history, as either the most impressive display of human adaptability, or the most confusing 10 minutes anyone had witnessed in decades. Jake approached the obstacle course like he was heading to the grocery store. The course itself was a nightmare of swinging hammers, climbing walls, rope traverses, and what appeared to be a section designed by someone who really hated knees. The increased gravity should have made each step a struggle, each jump a gamble, each climb an exercise in futility. Instead, Jake hopped over the first barrier, like it was a sidewalk crack. He ducked under the swinging hammers with casual ease, timing them perfectly without seeming to think about it. The rope traverse, which should have been impossible under doubled gravity, became an opportunity for Jake to demonstrate what could only be described as aggressive nonchalance. Is he supposed to be moving that fast? Wisp asked, materializing next to Zephyr out of pure curiosity. According to my calculations, absolutely not, Zephyr replied, his tentacles writhing in agitation. The gravitational increase should have reduced his efficiency by approximately 47%, with additional degradation due to unfamiliarity with the equipment and obvious species-based physical limitations. Granite watched Jake vault over a wall that had been giving senior cadets trouble for years. Human is not acting human. Commander Vextar stood with his forearms crossed, his reptilian brain struggling to process what he was seeing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The human should be gasping, stumbling, maybe crying a little. Instead, Jake was making the course look like a casual morning jog. Jake reached the end of the course and turned back with a slight frown. Commander, I hate to complain, but I think there might be something wrong with your gravity generators. Wrong how? Vexter's voice was carefully controlled, the way people talk when they're trying not to lose their temper in public. Well, it's definitely heavier than standard Earth gravity, but not by much. Maybe 1.5, 1.8 times normal. Jake scratched his head. I was expecting more of a challenge, honestly. The brochure made this place sound pretty intense. A silence fell over the training facility that could have been bottled and sold as awkward. Vexter's left eye began to twitch. Recruit Murphy, the gravity in your training area is currently set to exactly twice your homeworld's normal gravitational pull. Oh, Jake said, looking genuinely surprised. Only double. Huh, I was wondering why it felt so light today. Light. Vexter's voice cracked slightly. Yeah, you know, bouncy, like when you're underwater and everything feels easier. Jake looked around at the other recruits, who were staring at him like he'd just announced he could fly. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate you guys going easy on me while I get used to things, but if we could bump it up to maybe triple normal, that might give me a better workout. Wisp flickered out of existence entirely. Zephyr's tentacles went completely still, which Jake was learning, meant the alien was either calculating something very complex or having the equivalent of a system crash. Granite made a sound like a landslide. Triple, Vexter repeated slowly. If it's not too much trouble, Jake said helpfully. I mean, I grew up on Kepler Station, which runs about 2.7 Earth normal on a good day. When the gravity generators were acting up, we'd sometimes hit 3.5, 4 times normal. Really builds character, you know. Vexter stared at him. You grew up where? Kepler Station. It's a mining platform in the asteroid belt between Earth and Mars. Artificial gravity, but they ran it heavy to keep the equipment stable and the workers honest. My dad always said Earth felt like a vacation planet compared to home. Jake shrugged. Course, I've been on Earth for the past few years for school, so I'm probably a little out of shape. Out of shape, Vexter said faintly. Yeah, you know how it is. Soft living makes you soft. Jake gestured at the obstacle course. This barely got my heart rate up. I'm worried I'm going to lose my conditioning if we keep training at tourist world gravity levels. Somewhere in the distance, another instructor dropped a clipboard. The sound echoed through the training facility like a gunshot. You want me to increase the gravity to 3 times your world's normal, Vexter said, his voice taking on the tone of someone confirming their own insanity. If you don't mind, Jake said cheerfully. I promise I won't complain if it's too easy. Commander Vextar stared at the gravity control panel like it had personally insulted his mother. His 4 hands hovered over the controls, 3 of them trembling slightly while the 4th maintained what he probably thought was professional composure. Triple gravity, he muttered to himself. The human wants triple gravity. Is that a problem, sir? Jake asked, genuinely concerned. I mean, if the equipment can't handle it, I understand. Safety first and all that. Vextar's eye twitched again. Safety. The human was worried about safety while asking to train under gravitational conditions that would crush most species into paste. The equipment can handle it, Vextar said through gritted teeth. The question is whether you can. Only one way to find out, Jake replied cheerfully. What happened next violated several laws of physics, common sense and possibly good taste. Vextar cranked the gravity to 3 times Earth normal, fully expecting to watch Jake crumple like a house of cards in a hurricane. Instead, Jake stretched his arms over his head, cracked his neck and said, "Oh, that's much better. Feels like home." Then he started doing jumping jacks. Not struggling, gasping, survival jumping jacks. Casual warming up, might as well get the blood flowing jumping jacks. This is impossible, Zephyr whispered. Except his whisper came out as more of a wheeze because his tentacles were now dragging on the ground like wet spaghetti. The mathematical probability of a carbon-based life form maintaining that level of mobility under triple gravitational stress approaches 0.001%. Math is stupid, Granite declared. Which was probably the most philosophical thing he'd ever said. Unfortunately, it was also the last thing he said before the increased gravity caused a hairline fracture to appear across his rocky torso with an ominous cracking sound. Wisp had given up any pretense of maintaining physical form, and was now just a vaguely humanoid shimmer that kept trying to phase through the floor. I can't become incorporeal, she said in a voice like breaking glass. The gravity is too strong. I'm stuck being solid. This is terrible. What if someone tries to shake my hand? What if I have to sit in chairs? What if I accidentally bump into things and they don't go through me? Jake, meanwhile, had moved on from jumping jacks to what appeared to be an impromptu gymnastics routine. He performed a backflip that should have been physically impossible under triple gravity, landed it perfectly, then looked around and noticed his fellow recruits' distress. "Oh hey, you guys don't look so good," he said, jogging over to Zephyr, whose tentacles were now completely flat against the floor. Here, let me help. Before anyone could protest, Jake had scooped up Zephyr's tentacles and was essentially carrying the alien like a very confused, very heavy backpack. This is highly irregular, Zephyr protested weakly. Interspecies physical contact during training exercises is not recommended due to potential biological incompatibilities, and oh my stars, you're incredibly strong, aren't you? Just good genetics, Jake said modestly, then looked over at Granite, who was now sporting several new cracks and making sounds like a cement mixer having an existential crisis. Granite buddy, you okay over there? Am experiencing structural integrity failure, Granite replied with admirable stoicism for someone who was literally falling apart. Jake walked over, still carrying Zephyr, and casually hefted Granite onto his shoulders. The rock being had to weigh at least 300 pounds under normal circumstances. Under triple gravity, he should have been impossible to lift. Jake carried him like he was made of styrofoam. Wisp, you coming? Jake called to the flickering energy being. I can't move properly, Wisp wailed. Everything feels so heavy and solid and real. It's horrible. No problem, Jake said, and somehow managed to scoop up the energy being as well, carrying all three of his alien teammates like they were particularly awkward luggage. From the observation deck, Commander Vexstar watched this display with the expression of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled by a cheerful human with apparently unlimited carrying capacity. Sir, said Lieutenant Kexfall, Vexstar's aide, should we perhaps consider that our assumptions about human physical capabilities might have been somewhat conservative? Somewhat conservative, Vexstar repeated flatly, watching Jake perform what appeared to be lunges while carrying three alien beings under triple gravity. Yes, Lieutenant, somewhat conservative, like calling a supernova somewhat bright. Jake, oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing in the command staff, had started doing squats, while carrying his teammates, under triple gravity. This is a great workout, he called up to the observation deck. Really feeling the burn now. Thanks for the adjustment, Commander. Should we try the advanced course next? Vexstar's remaining composure finally cracked. Advanced course. You want to try the advanced course? Well, yeah, Jake said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. I mean, we've got some time left in the training period, and I'd hate to waste it. Plus, the guys here could probably use the team building experience. Team building, Vexstar said weakly. Sure, nothing brings people together like shared adversity, right? Jake adjusted his grip on his alien cargo. Besides, I think they're starting to enjoy it. Aren't you guys? Zephyr made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been the alien equivalent of a death rattle. Granite's response was lost in the sound of sedimentary layers shifting. Wisp just flickered more rapidly. I'm taking that as a yes, Jake said happily. By the time Jake had finished his impromptu team-carrying workout session, word had spread through the academy faster than gossip at a church social. Senior cadets, instructors, and what appeared to be several high-ranking officials had gathered in the observation deck, all wearing the same expression of confused fascination that people get when watching a traffic accident involving circus performers. Jake finally set his teammates down as the gravity returned to normal, and they collapsed in various states of relief and existential questioning. That was invigorating, Jake said, barely breathing hard. Really got the blood pumping. You guys feel better? Zephyr's tentacles twitched weakly. I need to recalculate everything I know about physics, biology, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. Definitely experienced character growth, Granite confirmed, examining his new stress fractures with what might have been pride. Wisp had solidified into her most stable form yet, apparently too exhausted to phase. I never want to be incorporeal again. Being solid isn't so bad. You can't fall through floors when you're solid. Commander Vexter descended from the observation deck like a reptilian storm cloud, his forearms moving in patterns that suggested he was either preparing for combat or having a nervous breakdown. Possibly both. Murphy, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose entire career had just been redefined by a single human with an apparently supernatural tolerance for gravitational punishment. Yes, sir. The other instructors and I have been discussing your performance today. Jake's face fell slightly. Oh, was I not supposed to help the other recruits? I know teamwork wasn't explicitly part of the exercise, but they looked like they needed assistance, and back on Kepler Station we always said that you're only as strong as your weakest link, so I figured. You figured correctly. Vexter interrupted, which seemed to surprise him as much as anyone else. However, there appears to be some question about whether our standard training regimen is providing you with adequate challenge. Oh, it's fine, Jake said quickly. I don't want to be any trouble. I can work with whatever you've got. That's the problem, Vexter muttered, then raised his voice. The Academy has one final test that we reserve for our most exceptional students. It's called the Crucible. A hush fell over the assembled crowd. Even the senior cadets who had been whispering among themselves went silent. The Crucible, Vexter continued, is designed to push even our most elite warriors to their absolute limits. It combines physical challenges, mental puzzles, and survival scenarios that would break most sentient beings. No first-year cadet has ever completed it. Most seniors fail. Jake nodded politely. Sounds challenging. It's conducted under quadruple gravity. Okay, quadruple Murphy. 4 times your home world's gravitational pull. I heard you the first time, sir. Sounds like fun. Vexter's left eye started twitching again. Fun. He says it sounds like fun. He turned to address the crowd in the observation deck. The human thinks quadruple gravity sounds like fun. Will there be obstacle courses? Jake asked hopefully. Among other things. Yes. Cool. When do we start? Vexter was quiet for a long moment, staring at Jake like he was a puzzle that was missing several crucial pieces. There's one condition, Murphy. You don't go alone. Sir, the Crucible is designed as a team exercise. You'll take your squad with you. Vexter gestured at Zephyr, Granite, and Wisp, who were still recovering from their previous gravitational adventure. Jake looked at his teammates, then back at Vexter. With respect, Commander, they just barely survived triple gravity. Putting them through quadruple seems a little harsh. That's not your decision to make, recruit. Actually, Zephyr interrupted, his tentacles slowly regaining their normal flexibility. According to Academy regulations, squad leaders do have discretionary authority over team member participation in voluntary advanced challenges. Squad leaders. Vexter's voice rose slightly. Oh yes, Zephyr continued, his analytical nature overriding his exhaustion. Based on performance metrics, leadership demonstrated under pressure, and capacity for protecting team members, Jake has clearly established himself as the de facto leader of our unit. The probability calculations are quite clear. I am not weak link anymore, Granite added. Jake made me stronger. We'll follow Jake. Wisp flickered once, then solidified completely. If Jake thinks we can do it, then we can do it. He carried us through triple gravity. Maybe he can carry us through this too. Jake looked genuinely touched. Guys, you don't have to. We're a team, Wisp said firmly. Teams stick together. Vexter looked around at the crowd, then back at the unlikely squad standing before him. The human who treated quadruple gravity like a gym membership perk. The analytical alien who was recalculating the laws of physics. The rock being who had discovered the concept of personal growth. And the energy creature who had learned the value of staying solid. Fine, Vexter said finally. The Crucible begins in 1 hour. I suggest you use that time to make peace with whatever deities your species worship. Thanks, Commander, Jake said cheerfully. Should we bring snacks? The Crucible lived up to its reputation as a monument to institutional sadism. Under quadruple gravity, it was less an obstacle course and more a guided tour through the 9 circles of military hell. The course featured everything from impossible climbs to puzzle solving under time pressure to what appeared to be actual lava pits, because apparently the Academy believed in thorough preparation for worst-case scenarios. Most cadets who attempted the Crucible lasted about 15 minutes before being carried out on stretchers. Jake's team lasted exactly 47 minutes, which would have been a new Academy record if anyone had been in any condition to keep track of time. For the first 20 minutes, Jake carried Zephyr, Granite, and Wisp through obstacles that should have been impossible under normal gravity, let alone quadruple. When they reached the puzzle section, he set them down gently and said, "Okay guys, this is where I need your brains. I'm great with the physical stuff, but you're the smart ones." Zephyr, despite being compressed to roughly half his normal height by the gravity, managed to solve a mathematical sequence that had been stumping senior cadets for months. Granite, his rocky exterior now sporting an impressive collection of stress fractures, used his geological knowledge to identify the one safe path across an unstable cavern floor. Wisp, maintaining solid form through sheer determination and gravitational coercion, phased just enough to scout ahead and identify hidden traps. When they reached the final challenge, a rescue scenario involving extracting casualties from a collapsed structure while under enemy fire, Jake simply picked up all 3 of his teammates plus the simulated wounded and carried them to safety while dodging laser blasts and making encouraging comments about teamwork. The buzzer that signaled course completion hadn't sounded in over 3 years. When it finally went off, the silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next solar system. Commander Vextar stood in the observation deck, staring at the completion time display like it might change if he looked at it hard enough. Around him, instructors, senior cadets and Academy officials wore expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to existential crisis. 47 minutes, someone whispered. New record, someone else added unnecessarily. By a first-year cadet, a third voice contributed, just to make sure everyone was clear on exactly how impossible this was. Down in the Crucible chamber, Jake was helping his teammates stand up, all of them looking exhausted but triumphant. Well, mostly exhausted. Jake looked like he'd just finished a pleasant morning jog. That was actually pretty fun, he said, brushing dust off his uniform. Good puzzle design, nice variety in the physical challenges. Really well-balanced course. Vextar descended to the chamber floor like a reptilian avalanche, his forearms crossed and his expression unreadable. He stopped directly in front of Jake and stared at him for a long moment. "Murphy," he said finally. "Yes, sir, what kind of death world produced you?" Jake looked genuinely confused. "Death world, sir, I'm from Earth. Well, technically Kepler Station, but Earth originally." "Earth is not a death world, Murphy. Earth is classified as a garden world. Pleasant climate, moderate gravity, abundant resources, minimal existential threats." Vextar's voice was getting louder. "Earth is where other species go for vacation." "Oh well, yeah, Earth's nice," Jake agreed. "Really relaxing after growing up on the station. Like I said, Kepler Station runs heavy gravity for mining operations. Plus the radiation shielding was always a little dodgy, so we had to stay in shape in case of emergency evacuations. And the air recyclers had a tendency to fail, so we all got really good at holding our breath and working fast." Vextar stared at him. "Radiation, failing life support. Emergency evacuations. Just part of life in the mining colonies, sir. Builds character." Jake shrugged. "My dad always said the soft living on Earth would make me weak, so I tried to keep up my conditioning while I was in school. Construction work helped, but it wasn't quite the same as home." "Construction work," Vextar repeated faintly. "Yeah, heavy construction, moving steel beams, pouring foundations, that sort of thing. Good workout, but like I said, the gravity on Earth made it feel a little easy." Jake looked around at the crucible chamber. "This was much more like what I'm used to. Really appreciated the challenge." In the observation deck, Lieutenant Kexval leaned over to his commander. "Sir, should we perhaps reconsider our classification of human homeworlds? You think?" Vextar snapped, then turned back to Jake. "Murphy, you're hereby promoted to squad leader, Alpha class. Your team will be transferred to the advanced training program." "Thank you, sir, but I should probably mention something first." "What now?" Jake looked slightly embarrassed. "Well, I was wondering if you guys had any low-gravity recovery pools or anything like that. All this normal and heavy gravity work is great for training, but I'm starting to feel a bit sluggish. Maybe something around half-Earth normal. Just to loosen up the muscles, you know." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Vextar's composure finally snapping like a twig. "Recovery pools," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The human wants recovery pools because he's feeling sluggish. If it's not too much trouble," Jake added helpfully. And that's how Jake Murphy, the human who thought quadruple gravity was a good warm-up, became the first cadet in Academy history to request lighter gravity for recovery purposes, and the only student to make his instructors question the fundamental nature of reality itself. The Academy never did get those low-gravity pools installed, but they did start including a new warning in their recruitment materials. "Humans may not be what they appear. Proceed with caution, and keep gravity generators well maintained."